I'm Caroline. A few nights ago, I stood in my cozy kitchen, my eyes fixed on the front door as the doorbell rang incessantly. It was as if the ghosts of my past had finally tracked me down. My heart raced, and I knew exactly who was on the other side. The woman on the porch hadn't been a real mother to me for over 2 decades. It all started on that fateful night when a torrential rainstorm hit, and she chose my twin sister, Lily, over me. After that, everything changed. What struck me as odd wasn't her appearance, it was the desperation in her voice. It was as if she knew that once I opened the door, her expectations would shatter. Through the doorbell camera, I watched her pace back and forth, wipe away tears, ring the bell again, and then pound on the door as if she could force her way back into a life she'd abandoned long ago. Behind me, my real life stood in silence, a warm, safe home filled with love that didn't waver in the face of hardship. She had no idea what awaited her on the other side. When she finally saw it, her face paled so quickly that it startled me. She stared past me, her mouth agape, and whispered, "No, no, this can't be happening." What she saw was the life I'd built without her, a life she'd never thought I could have. To understand why that look on her face was so significant, let me take you back to when I was 13. We lived in a small town outside Seattle, in a neighborhood where every house seemed picture perfect from the street. Inside our home, perfection meant high academic achievements, strict discipline, and living up to the future my parents had mapped out for us. Lily was the ideal daughter. She was smart, organized, and composed under pressure. I, on the other hand, was more interested in painting and capturing the beauty of the world around me. My mother often said I was a daydreamer, that I had potential but lacked the drive to succeed. What she really meant was that I wasn't the daughter she wanted. The night of the storm, chaos ensued. We'd been warned of a severe storm, and everyone in the house was in a hurry to gather essentials. Lily, who had a weak heart, started having trouble breathing. My mother dropped everything and rushed to her side. I still remember the look on her face, it was pure panic, but it was only for Lily. She thrust a waterproof folder into my hands and told me to go to the attic to get the emergency kit. I did as I was told, trying to be helpful and move as fast as I could. But when I came back downstairs, the front door was wide open, rain was pouring in, and the car was gone. At first, I thought they'd just moved the car. Then I checked the garage. But as the lights flickered and the wind howled, I realized they'd left me behind. I called out until my throat was raw, running from room to room like a lost child. Then, a window shattered, and fear took over. I locked myself in the basement with my phone, a flashlight, and a towel to block the water seeping in. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely unlock my phone, but I managed to call 911. I told the operator that my family had left me and that I didn't know what to do. I tried so hard not to cry, fearing that if I sounded too scared, they wouldn't understand me. A rescue team arrived just before the worst of the flooding. One of the firefighters wrapped me in a thick blanket and carried me through the rain to the rescue truck. At the emergency shelter, I expected my parents to rush to me, to apologize for leaving me. Instead, my mother was angry, and my father looked exhausted. She hugged Lily first and then turned to me and said, "Caroline, why didn't you come straight out when I told you to?" I was in shock, unable to believe what I was hearing. My father said they'd assumed I was behind them, that Lily was in critical condition, and that everything had happened so fast. But not once did they say they were sorry. In the following weeks, my fear turned into resentment. I couldn't sleep during heavy rain, and the sound of wind against the windows would wake me up gasping. My grades dropped, and I flinched every time my mother raised her voice. My parents treated me like a burden, saying that Lily needed all their attention. A month later, they told me I was going to live with my aunt, Rose, in San Diego. They called it a fresh start, but I knew it was because they couldn't face the fact that they'd left me behind. I cried throughout the flight, wondering if I was being punished for not being good enough. My Aunt Rose lived in a sunny house in San Diego with her husband and 2 young daughters. When I first arrived, She took my bag and told me that I didn't have to rush to fit in. She showed me a room with a beautiful view, filled with art supplies and snacks. It was the first time someone had ever prepared for me like that. The first few months were tough. I still jumped at the sound of thunder and often checked the driveway, hoping my parents would come and say it was all a mistake. But they never did. The calls became fewer and colder, and eventually, they stopped altogether. My father sent money, but I realized later that it was easier for him to send money than to give me love and an apology. Lily and I kept in touch secretly at first. We texted late at night and video called when we could. She told me that our mother got tense whenever my name came up, and our father avoided the topic. She said she missed me so much, and I believed her because I knew she wasn't the enemy. She'd been chosen, but it wasn't her fault. Aunt Rose never tried to change me. She encouraged me to pursue my art and supported me in everything I did. When I joined the art club at school, she was proud. When I brought home a painting, she hung it on the wall like it was a masterpiece. Slowly, I started to heal. I made friends, my grades improved, and I learned to sleep through storms. In high school, I met Ryan at an art exhibition. He was helping set up the display and got paint on his shirt. He smiled at me like it was the most natural thing in the world. We became friends and then fell in love. We supported each other through college, part-time jobs, and all the challenges of growing up. When we got married, it was a small, intimate ceremony filled with people who truly loved us. Aunt Rose cried with joy, and Lily stood by my side. My parents weren't there. Maybe they didn't know, or maybe they chose not to come. Either way, I didn't let it ruin my day. A year later, our daughter, Ava, was born. The moment I held her in my arms, I promised myself that she would never have to doubt my love. She would always feel safe and wanted. For over a decade, my parents were like distant ghosts. Their silence was a constant reminder of the pain they'd caused. Then, one day, Lily came to visit and told me that our mother had been asking about me. At first, I thought she was exaggerating. But then she showed me the messages. Our mother wanted to know if I was okay, if I still lived in San Diego, and if she thought I'd be open to seeing them. I was more annoyed than emotional. After all these years of silence, of missed birthdays and milestones, they suddenly wanted to reconnect. A day later, I got a message from my mother. It was short and polite, asking if they could visit. There was no apology, no mention of the storm or sending me away. Part of me wanted to ignore the message and protect my peaceful life. Another part was curious. I wanted to see if they'd changed, if they'd finally realized that they hadn't ruined me. So, I agreed to let them come on a Saturday afternoon. I didn't tell them much about my life, not about Ryan, Ava, or that Aunt Rose would be there. As the day approached, I became restless. I cleaned the house over and over, rearranged the furniture, and checked the doorbell camera constantly. Ryan noticed my unease and offered to take Ava out for the afternoon, but I refused. This was our home, and I wasn't going to hide my life for them. Aunt Rose arrived with groceries and her calm presence. She knew about my parents' visit and simply squeezed my hand and said, "You don't have to be someone you're not for them." Lily also texted to say she was on her way. Her support meant a lot to me. At 3 p.m., the doorbell rang. My stomach dropped and I looked at the camera. There they were, older, with my father's hair turning gray and my mother looking smaller. I expected them to wait patiently, but instead, my mother rang the bell again and again, then knocked on the door. I remembered being a 13-year-old trapped in a house, begging for someone to come back for me. Now, she was the one outside, powerless, while I held the power to decide. When I finally opened the door, she gasped. Her eyes widened as she saw Ryan holding Ava, Aunt Rose standing behind me, and Lily by my side. Her face went pale, and she whispered, "No, this can't be." I said calmly, "This is my life. You wanted to reconnect, and here it is." They stepped inside, looking uncomfortable. My father kept clearing his throat, and my mother seemed unable to decide whether to cry, apologize, or defend herself. My mother started by saying she'd thought about me for a long time and that too much time had passed. I looked her in the eye and asked, "Why now?" She said families shouldn't stay broken, but I almost laughed. Families shouldn't leave a child in a storm either. My father then told his version of the story, saying it was all chaos and they'd thought I was behind them. I interrupted and said the mistake was leaving, and the choice to keep leaving me after that. My mother started crying, but I couldn't tell if it was for me or herself. She said they'd thought San Diego would be good for me and that Lily needed stability. I told them about the night in the basement, the fear, and the hope that they'd come back for me. Aunt Rose also spoke up, telling them about how I'd suffered after I came to live with her. I then said the words I'd been holding in for years, "You didn't just leave me in the storm, you kept leaving me every day after that." My mother sank onto the couch, looking at Ava with a strange expression. She asked Lily why she'd never told them. Lily replied, "It wasn't my story to tell after you treated her like she didn't matter." My mother then said they'd done the best they could. I went still, realizing that nothing meaningful was coming. I told her that the emergency was one night, and their best should have started the next day. Ryan then made a simple gesture, gently kissing Ava's head and setting down her diaper bag. It was a small, loving act that showed the life we'd built. My mother saw it and understood that I'd found a family that loved me unconditionally. After that, there was nothing left to say. My father mumbled that the timing was bad, and my mother said they should go. I didn't stop them or say I forgave them. I just held the door open. For a few days, I thought the worst was over. But then, I got a message from Lily saying I should check Facebook. When I opened the app, I was shocked. My mother had written a long post about how they'd tried to reconnect with me, only to be humiliated. She called me cold and cruel, and she tagged people from my professional life. I was angry and scared at first. But then, I realized I didn't have to be silent. I wrote a comment, telling the truth about what had happened. People started to support me, including Lily, who said I was telling the truth. Even some relatives who had stayed silent for years spoke up. My mother's post backfired. She refused to take it down out of pride, but it damaged her reputation. Her volunteer work and consulting job were affected. My father's social life also suffered. Lily went to see them and told them to remove the post. They threatened to cut me off completely, but I didn't care. I had my family, Ryan, Ava, Aunt Rose, and Lily. They couldn't take that away from me. In the end, the post was removed, but there was no apology. It was just silence again, but this time, it was different. It was a silence that showed they'd lost the power to hurt me. One evening, a light rain started to fall. I was in Ava's room when the first thunderclap sounded. My body tensed instinctively, but Ryan came in and put his hand on my neck. He didn't ask what was wrong, he just stood there with me as I rocked Ava to sleep. In that moment, I realized that the deepest justice was having a family who would always be there for me, especially during the storms of life. So, do you think forgiveness should always come first? Or are there times when choosing peace and protecting yourself is the stronger choice?